Encounter at the Sacred Springs. Commander Brennan Blackwood had never imagined his first diplomatic mission as Earth's ambassador to Celestia Prime would involve trudging through alien wilderness under twin suns that burned like molten gold in a sky of swirling amethyst. The black armored suit clung to his skin uncomfortably, each step making the plasma rifle slung across his back seem heavier, more oppressive. He muttered under his breath, recalling the words of Earth's diplomatic core, cultural sensitivity is paramount. One misstep could trigger an interstellar conflict. He had laughed then. Now sweat trickling through his thick beard and boots, crunching over crystalline dust, he wasn't laughing anymore. The crystalline cliffs surrounding him shimmered in alien beauty, refracting light into 1,000 colors. Steam rose in graceful tendrils from countless hot springs scattered across the rugged terrain. His Celestian guide, a stoic man draped in flowing white robes, had insisted on staying behind, citing some personal purification rite. Brennan had been told little of the Celestian spiritual customs, except that they were fiercely protective of sacred spaces. Still, he pressed on, eyes scanning the narrow path. According to his navigation device, the diplomatic compound was just beyond the next ridge. Then he heard it water splashing faintly through the humid air. He slowed, senses sharpening. Rounding a bend, he saw steam rising thick from a secluded pool, partially veiling what lay within. Through the mist, a pale figure moved, slender, graceful, with hair as black as deep space, cascading down a naked back. Brennan froze, his brain stuttering as it tried to process what he was seeing. A Celestian woman, completely unclothed, bathing in what he belatedly realized must be one of their sacred springs. Their eyes met across the shimmering veil of steam. Hers were enormous dark pools that widened with shock, and something else, a flash of alarm. In one fluid motion, she snatched a white cloth and pressed it to her chest. But the moment had already happened. Brennan's heart lurched as she straightened, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "By the ancient laws, you have seen me unclothed," she declared. Her voice was both melodic and sharp, carrying an authority that made his gut clench. "There are only two paths forward now: human marriage or death, for us both." What Brennan stammered, stumbling back a step. "Look, this was an accident. I didn't mean to intrude. I'm sure we can." "There are no accidents in matters of honor," she snapped, cutting him off. "Our laws are absolute. You must become my mate or we both face execution at sunset." "That's insane," Brennan protested, forcing himself to meet her gaze, instead of letting his eyes drop to the soft curve of her exposed shoulders. "I'm a diplomatic representative of Earth. You can't just—" A distant horn echoed through the crystalline cliffs, low and ominous. The woman's expression shifted instantly from indignation to urgency. "That is the temple guard," she whispered fiercely. "Someone must have seen you enter this sacred area. We have very little time." Brennan's mind raced. This had to be some kind of cultural misunderstanding. Surely there was room for negotiation. But the fear in her eyes was too raw, too real to ignore. Voices carried through the steam, now gruff and commanding. Heavy footsteps crunched against the crystal dust. "Hide," she hissed, gesturing to a narrow crevice concealed behind the hot spring. "Quickly, I will try to misdirect them, but know this situation cannot be undone. Think carefully, human male. Our lives both depend on what you choose." Brennan ducked into the crevice, his heart pounding as the thermal steam enveloped him. He crouched low, gripping the plasma rifle tight, though he knew firing it would likely spark a war. The woman's silhouette shifted through the haze towel clutched to her form with an elegance born of desperation. Voices drew nearer, then a deep male voice spoke. "Lady Astria, your presence here is unexpected. The sacred springs are reserved for purification rituals at this hour." "Captain Thon," she replied, her tone steady despite the situation. "I was not aware of any scheduled rituals. I sought solitude for meditation." There are reports of an unauthorized human male in this sector. Another guard said, suspicion lacing his words. Have you seen any outsiders? How could I? Astria replied with indignant composure. Would a human male dare to intrude upon such a private moment? Brennan's breath caught. Her quick thinking was impressive, but guilt gnawed at him. He was, in fact, the exact intruder she spoke of. From his hiding place, he saw the steam swirl around her form like an ethereal shroud, her towel catching the light as if the universe itself sought to hide her. My lady, said Captain Thon, his tone softening as the daughter of High Counselor Lysander, you should not be here without an escort. These are dangerous times with so many off-worlders on Celestia Prime. Daughter of a High Counselor. Brennan's stomach dropped. This was no mere citizen. This was a political complication of the highest order. I appreciate your concern, Captain Astria replied coolly, but I can protect myself. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must dress and return to the palace. The guards murmured assent and withdrew. Brennan held his breath, waiting until finally Astria appeared at the crevice entrance. She now wore an iridescent robe that caught and refracted the light like liquid starlight. We don't have much time, she whispered, extending her hand. The guards will return once they realize I have left. We must reach the palace before they complete their patrol. Brennan hesitated only a moment before taking her hand. It was warm, surprisingly steady. As they began to move, he muttered, You're the High Counselor's daughter. Why didn't you mention that earlier? Astria's dark eyes met his, both challenging and alluring. Would it have changed your reaction? Human titles mean little when sacred law binds us. Even my father cannot override traditions that predate our space age. Brennan's pulse quickened as she led him along a narrow hidden path, every step carrying him deeper into a destiny he hadn't chosen yet couldn't seem to escape. The ultimatum and the escape. Brennan's boots slipped on the crystal-laden path as Astria pulled him along with surprising strength for someone of her delicate build. The narrow passage wound like a serpent cutting through the cliffs with only faint beams of light filtering in from above. The air smelled faintly of minerals and steam thick with tension. Brennan could hear the guards' voices echoing faintly in the distance, a constant reminder that every second counted. Where are we going? Brennan hissed under his breath, his hand tightening on the grip of his plasma rifle. To the palace, Astria replied curtly. There are secret passages even the temple guard doesn't know about. If we can reach them, you might live long enough to regret seeing me unclothed. Brennan winced at the venom in her tone. Listen, this is madness. I didn't intend to violate your customs. Surely we can explain. You still don't understand. Astria interrupted, spinning to face him. Her dark eyes glittered in the dim light, burning with a mixture of fear and defiance. There is no explaining. The sacred law does not bend for outsiders, not even for Earth's ambassadors. If you refuse to bond with me, they will execute us both before the sun set. Why? Both Brennan demanded, his voice tight. Why should you die for my mistake? Because honor binds us together now. The springs revealed my essence to you. In the eyes of my people, we are already tethered. To deny that is to deny the truth of the springs, and the punishment for such denial is death. A faint rumble reverberated through the tunnel as distant crystal formations shifted. Brennan exhaled slowly, forcing his racing mind to focus. Then why are you helping me? He asked cautiously. You could have turned me in, claimed. I forced my way into the sacred springs. They'd execute me alone. Astria looked away, her expression unreadable. Because I do not wish to die either, and perhaps a part of me wonders if the springs chose you for a reason. Before Brennan could respond, the sound of footsteps on crystal echoed loudly behind them. Astria's head whipped around her hand, tightening on his wrist. They've found our trail, she whispered sharply. Move. They broke into a run, the path narrowing until Brennan had to hunch to avoid scraping his head on jagged overhangs. The air grew warmer, wetter, as if they were descending deeper into the planet's veins. Steam curled around them like phantom fingers. The tunnel forked suddenly. Astria hesitated only a moment before choosing the left path. Brennan followed, but not before glancing over his shoulder. A faint glimmer of light reflected off dark armor in the distance guards. "They're gaining on us," Brennan said through gritted teeth. Astria didn't reply, but her pace quickened, her robe flaring like liquid starlight as she darted through the shadows. Brennan's military training kicked in, his breathing steadying his senses, sharpening despite the oppressive heat. Finally, the passage widened into a cavern. A faint glow emanated from pools of luminous water scattered across the floor, casting eerie patterns on the walls. "This way," Astria said, moving toward a narrow fissure barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. Brennan grabbed her arm. "Wait." She spun on him, her eyes flashing. "We don't have time." "Tell me the truth," Brennan interrupted. "Is this a trap? Did your people plan this to force an alliance with Earth?" Astria stiffened, her jaw tightening. "You think this was orchestrated, that I would humiliate myself in the sacred springs as part of some political maneuver?" "I don't know what to think," Brennan shot back. "Everything about this screams setup. A lone human ambassador stumbles onto the High Counselor's daughter in a sacred site and is suddenly bound by ancient laws. Convenient." Astria's hand lashed out, striking his chest, not with force, but enough to make him flinch. Her voice was low, shaking with anger and hurt. "The springs are older than our cities, older than our spacefaring age. They do not care for politics human. They reveal truths that cannot be undone." A sound like shattering glass echoed through the cavern. Both their heads snapped toward the tunnel they'd just left. The guards had arrived. Astria grabbed Brennan's wrist again. "There is no more time. You can question my motives later if we survive." They squeezed through the fissure, the jagged rock tearing at Brennan's suit. On the other side lay a narrow ledge overlooking a deep chasm, glowing faintly with bioluminescent flora. A series of precarious stepping stones led across. "Seriously," Brennan muttered. "It's the only way," Astria said. She stepped out onto the first stone, her balance perfect despite the dizzying drop below. Brennan followed cautiously, each movement deliberate. Halfway across, a shout echoed behind them. "There! They're escaping!" A plasma bolt sizzled past Brennan's shoulder, scorching the rock. He ducked instinctively, heart pounding. "Faster," Astria urged. They leapt across the final stones just as another shot rang out, striking the ledge where Brennan had stood seconds before. As they reached solid ground, Astria gestured urgently toward a cluster of thick crystal formations. "This way, the hidden passage is close." Brennan followed her into the shadows, his mind whirling. Marriage or death? Truth or dishonor? He hadn't signed up for this. But the fear in Astria's eyes was no act. And as much as he hated to admit it, part of him was already wondering what it would mean to bind himself to her in the eyes of her people, and what it would mean for the fragile peace between Earth and Celestia. Cultural clash and forbidden attraction. The hidden passage narrowed further, forcing Brennan and Astria to walk single file. The crystalline walls shimmered faintly with alien bioluminescence, casting dancing patterns across their faces. Brennan's breath came in quiet but measured bursts, his military instincts warring with the part of him that still couldn't comprehend how a simple diplomatic mission had turned into a desperate flight through alien catacombs. Astria moved ahead with practiced ease, her iridescent robe swirling like a living flame in the dim light. "Do you even understand what you've done?" Astria asked suddenly, her voice low but edged with steel. She didn't look back at him, yet her words cut deep. "You've disrupted my entire life. You've seen what no other was ever meant to witness. To my people, you've seen my soul." Brennan clenched his jaw. "It wasn't intentional. I didn't even know you were there." "It doesn't matter," Astria replied, spinning around to face him. Her dark eyes burned with a mix of fury and Something else. Intent doesn't undo sacred law. You are now tied to me whether you wish it or not. And if you think my father High Counselor Lysander will forgive this breach easily, you're a fool. Brennan stiffened. Your father might be furious, but he's also a statesman. He'll understand diplomacy. Astria's laugh was sharp, almost bitter. Diplomacy means nothing to a people who measure truth in what the sacred springs reveal. They believe the waters never lie. They've held our civilization together for millennia. Do you think they'll abandon that for a human envoy? The words stung more than Brennan expected. So what are you saying? That I should just submit? Become your husband to appease your laws? Her lips parted, then closed again. For the first time, Astria's confidence wavered. I'm saying, she began carefully, that there may be more at stake than either of us realizes. The springs don't bind people lightly. Perhaps there is a reason. Their eyes met in the dim glow tension crackling between them. Brennan opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by a distant hum vibrations in the crystal walls that felt almost alive. The guards are still searching, Astria murmured. We need to keep moving. They resumed their trek, the path sloping upward now. As they climbed, Brennan caught glimpses of Astria's profile, her strong jawline, the subtle curve of her lips, the graceful movement of her hair as it caught the faint glow. Despite himself, he found his thoughts drifting to her earlier words. You've seen my soul. His hand brushed against her robe accidentally as they squeezed through another narrow gap. The fabric was warm, impossibly soft, and for a fleeting second he felt her body tense. Watch yourself, human, she said, her voice quieter now, lacking its earlier venom. Sorry, Brennan muttered, though the heat rising in his face wasn't just from the exertion of their climb. Moments later, they reached a wider cavern, its ceiling high above them and glittering with embedded crystals. Small streams of water trickled into glowing pools, the air thick with the scent of alien blossoms. Astria paused at the edge, gazing into one of the pools. This place, she whispered. It's another sacred site. Brennan stepped closer, cautious. Do I need to avert my eyes? Astria's lips curved into the faintest smile, the first he'd seen from her. You're learning. Her smile faded as quickly as it appeared. But it doesn't matter now. You've already seen too much. Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Brennan wanted to say something, anything to cut through it, but he couldn't find the words. Instead, he asked, what happens if I agree to this union? Astria's eyes met his, dark and bottomless. You become my mate in every sense. In our culture, it's not just legal. It's spiritual, binding, eternal. And if I refuse, her jaw tightened. Then they kill us both. Brennan exhaled sharply. Quite the romantic culture you've got here. Astria's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You joke, but you don't understand. To us, the springs strip away all pretenses. They show only truth, and truth demands a price. Before Brennan could respond, a faint sound echoed from behind them. Voices. The guards were closing in. Astria grabbed his hand, not roughly this time, but with a surprising tenderness. We have to go. There's a hidden way to the palace from here. It's our only chance. As she pulled him toward another narrow passage, Brennan found his thoughts spinning wildly. He was an ambassador trained to mediate between species, not to be bound for life to an alien princess because of ancient customs. Yet as her fingers tightened around his, he realized he didn't pull away. The hidden cave and the choice. The air grew cooler as Brennan and Astria slipped through the narrow corridor and emerged into a cavernous space. The ceiling arched high above, adorned with hanging crystal formations that reflected the faint light in haunting patterns across the walls. At the center of the cavern was a pool, its surface still and glass-like, glowing with an otherworldly blue. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and a strange floral note that made Brennan's head swim. Astria paused near the water's edge, her hand still clasping his as though afraid to let go. Brennan's pulse thrummed in his ears. He gently pulled his hand free and took a step back, needing space to think. Here, Astria said softly. We're safe for now. The temple guards won't dare step into this place. It is too sacred even for them. Brennan stared at her, sweat cooling on his brow as his mind whirled. You call this safe? I'm stuck in an alien cave with a woman I barely know, and the options on the table are marry or die. That doesn't exactly sound like sanctuary. Astria turned to face him fully, her robe catching the blue light and shimmering like flowing water. Do you think I enjoy this situation? You are not the only one whose life has been thrown into chaos. Her voice cracked slightly, and Brennan caught a glimpse of the vulnerability beneath her fierce exterior. Why then, he asked. Why help me at all? You could have let them take me and saved yourself. Because I honor the law, Astria whispered, and because some part of me believes the springs never lie. If they revealed me to you, perhaps they see something I do not. A tense silence filled the cave. Brennan rubbed the back of his neck, frustration boiling beneath his calm facade. This doesn't make sense. My people don't have laws like this. We're taught to question tradition, not to surrender to it. Astria's dark eyes flashed. And how has that served you, War Division? The Celestians survive because we respect truth above all else. When the springs strip away every layer, all that's left is what is real. Brennan's jaw clenched. And what if I'm not ready for what's real? Then you die, Astria said simply, stepping closer. The heat between them was sudden, palpable. Or we both die. Do you think I want to bind myself to someone who doesn't understand my world, my people, my soul? She was inches away now, her gaze piercing into him. Brennan felt his breath catch, his heart hammering in his chest. I don't know if I understand you, he admitted, but I know I don't want to see you executed because of me. Astria's expression softened. And I don't want to die for a law I didn't choose either. Yet here we are, caught in its web. He took a tentative step closer, drawn by some gravitational force he couldn't explain. What would it mean exactly if I said yes? Her eyes searched his face. It means we are bound not only in name, but in essence. It means that from this moment you are mine and I am yours. There will be no undoing it. Brennan swallowed hard. The weight of her words settled over him like a mantle. No undoing. Before he could respond, a faint clatter echoed from the narrow tunnel they had entered through. Astria's head snapped toward the sound, her body tensing. They're still coming, she murmured. We don't have time to debate this. Brennan's fingers brushed against hers instinctively. He didn't pull away this time. Then what do we do? Astria exhaled, her voice almost a plea now. Trust me. For now, trust me, and I'll get us to the palace alive. Once we're there, we'll decide our path. Fine, Brennan said, his voice low. But I'm trusting you with my life, Astria. Her lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. And I'm trusting you with mine, human. Together they moved deeper into the cavern, leaving behind the faint glow of the sacred pool. The walls seemed to hum softly, as if acknowledging the weight of their choice. For Brennan, this was no longer just a mission. It was the start of something he couldn't yet name and perhaps couldn't walk away from. The pursuit and revelation. The passageway tightened again as Astria led Brennan along a twisting path, the air growing warmer and thicker with each step. Small flecks of luminescent spores drifted lazily in the air, sticking to Brennan's armored sleeves like faint stars. Somewhere in the distance he could still hear the faint reverberation of boots clanking on crystal. The guards weren't giving up. They're tracking us, Brennan muttered under his breath. Do they have sensors or something? No, Astria replied, her tone sharp. They don't need technology. They're temple guards. They have attunement to the sacred energies here. If we're not careful, they'll feel our presence. Brennan exhaled slowly, his military mind shifting into tactical mode. And you're telling me they're just going to sense us out of thin air? Wonderful. Astria didn't answer. She moved gracefully, almost soundlessly, her robe brushing against the narrow rock walls. Brennan noticed that her steps were deliberate, each one careful to avoid disturbing loose pebbles. He tried to mimic her, but his boots weren't made for subtlety. "Your steps are too heavy," she whispered, glancing back at him. Her expression softened slightly. "It's not your fault. This place wasn't built for outsiders." Brennan grunted. "Neither was your law." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile, but something close, perhaps not. Yet here we are. A sudden sharp noise made them both freeze. From behind, a faint blue glow grew brighter in the tunnel. Voices echoed, muffled but urgent. Brennan could make out snippets of Celestian speech, though he couldn't understand the language. The tone was enough the hunt was closing in. Astria turned to him, her dark eyes filled with steel and something else resolve. "We don't have time to argue anymore. If they catch us, it won't matter what either of us wants. They'll kill you instantly and drag me before the council for punishment." Brennan tightened his jaw. "Then what's your plan?" "This way," she said, tugging his hand. They darted down a narrow side tunnel that seemed barely wide enough for them to fit. Brennan's shoulder scraped against rough stone, sending a sharp sting through his arm. As they emerged, the air shifted hotter now, almost suffocating. The sound of rushing water filled Brennan's ears, and they stepped into a cavern where a massive underground waterfall crashed into a deep chasm. Mist billowed thick, obscuring the view beyond. Astria knelt near the edge and placed her palm on the rock, murmuring in her language. The ground beneath them trembled faintly, and then a narrow bridge of crystal emerged from the mist, stretching across the chasm to another ledge. "Are you serious?" Brennan asked, eyeing the delicate, glowing bridge. "Do you have a better idea?" Astria shot back. Before Brennan could respond, a voice boomed from behind. "Stop, Lady Astria. You are ordered to surrender the human." Brennan's instinct screamed at him to raise his plasma rifle, but Astria grabbed his arm. "No weapons. If you fire, they'll slaughter us both for defiling a sacred space." "Then run," Brennan growled. They bolted onto the crystal bridge, its surface vibrating under their weight. Brennan's boots slipped slightly on the smooth material, but Astria moved with impossible grace, her steps light as air. Plasma bolts hissed past them, searing the mist, but missing their marks. As they reached the other side, Astria murmured another phrase. The bridge disintegrated behind them, shattering into glowing shards that tumbled into the chasm. Brennan turned just in time to see the guards skidding to a halt on the opposite ledge, their weapons raised. "We bought time, but not much," Astria said, her breath coming fast. "We need to keep moving." They pressed on into another tunnel. This one was smoother, carved deliberately, rather than by natural forces. Faint etchings lined the walls, symbols Brennan didn't recognize. Astria ran her fingers over them as they passed. "What are those?" Brennan asked. "They tell the story of our people's first contact with the sacred springs," Astria replied softly. "And the first unions forged within them." "Unions," Brennan echoed, "like what's happening to us." She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, the springs reveal truth, and sometimes that truth demands joining two souls, no matter how impossible it seems." "Sounds convenient," Brennan muttered. "Almost like the universe has a twisted sense of humor." Astria stopped abruptly and turned to face him. "Do you think I enjoy this? That I want to be bound to an alien from a world I've never seen?" Her words stung more than Brennan expected. He met her gaze, seeing the flicker of pain behind her defiance. "No," he said quietly. "But you're still helping me." "Why?" Astria's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I can't help wondering if the springs chose you for a reason." Before Brennan could respond, a faint golden light appeared ahead. Astria's face hardened. "We're close. The hidden entrance to the palace is just beyond this passage. Once we're inside, we'll be safer." "Safer," Brennan repeated, his voice low. "Not safe." Astria's lips curved in a humorless smile. "With my people, there is no such thing as safe, not when sacred law is at stake." They stepped into the golden glow, and Brennan felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. Whatever awaited them in the palace, it would decide not only their fates, but perhaps the fragile future between their worlds. Council confrontation. The hidden passage ended at a narrow archway where flickering blue light seeped through. Brennan drew in a sharp breath as he stepped into the inner sanctum of the Celestian palace. His boots clicked softly on the crystal floor, the sound unnervingly loud in the vast space. Towering pillars of translucent stone reached for the domed ceiling above, refracting the twin suns' light into cascading waves of sapphire and gold. It was breathtaking, but there was no time to admire it. The High Council awaited. Astria tightened her robe around her shoulders and turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're entering sacred ground now. Once those doors open fully, the Council will see you as an intruder. Every word, every gesture from here on could decide if you live or die." Brennan forced a calm expression, though his fingers twitched near his sidearm out of habit. "Understood. Let me guess, charging uninvited into a holy bathhouse doesn't exactly make me popular. Do not joke, human," Astria warned sharply. "Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not touch anything. And above all, do not question their traditions, not here." Before Brennan could reply, the crystal doors parted with a low, resonant hum, and cold air rushed over them. The council chamber lay beyond a massive circular hall aglow with pale light emanating from a crystalline dome overhead. 12 counselors in elaborate robes sat in a crescent formation, their faces lined with age, wisdom, and judgment. At the center, on an elevated dais, sat High Counselor Lysander Astria's father, his eyes sharp and piercing, fixed on Brennan the moment he stepped through. "Lady Astria." Lysander began, his voice deep and thunderous, echoing off the crystalline walls like a judge's gavel. "You stand accused of violating the sanctity of the sacred springs and consorting with an outsider. Explain yourself." Astria raised her chin, her voice calm but firm. "Father, the human's presence was an accident. He stumbled into the springs unaware of our customs. There was no intent to dishonor our laws." "An accident," boomed Lord Kalen, a stern-faced counselor seated to Lysander's right. "Or a convenient excuse to bring an off-worlder into our most sacred space." Brennan tensed at Kalen's tone, but held his tongue, remembering Astria's warning. The weight of a dozen pairs of eyes pressed down on him like a physical force. Commander Brennan Blackwood Lysander said, his voice slicing through the silence. "Do you understand the gravity of your transgression? By our ancient laws, seeing a Celestian unclothed within the sacred springs binds you in union of spirit. To reject this union is to reject the truth of the springs, and that rejection is punishable by death." Brennan's jaw tightened. He chose his words carefully. "High Counselor, with respect, I meant no harm. I didn't know I was violating your laws. Where I come from, accidents are not recognized here," Lysander interrupted coldly. "Our laws are absolute. The springs do not lie. They revealed Astria's essence to you, and now you are bound by that truth." Lord Callan leaned forward, his voice sharp as a blade. "This off-worlder has defiled our ways. He must be executed to preserve the sanctity of our traditions." Astria stepped forward suddenly, her voice rising with a passion that startled Brennan. "If you kill him, you condemn me as well. You all know the punishment for rejecting a bond revealed by the springs." Murmurs rippled through the council chamber, their voices hushed but heavy with tension. Lysander's icy stare flicked between his daughter and Brennan. Silence commanded a melodic voice from the shadows. An elderly woman draped in flowing robes stepped into the light, her pale eyes glowing faintly. "The Oracle." Oracle Nera Lysander acknowledged, inclining his head with respect. "What guidance do the springs offer in this matter?" Nera moved slowly, her presence almost ethereal. She stopped before Brennan and Astria, her gaze impossibly deep. "The waters speak of destiny, Not deception, she said softly. This union was not an accident, it was foreseen long ago. Kalan sneered. Foreseen or fabricated to manipulate us. The oracle's gaze snapped to him, her tone suddenly sharp. Do you dare question the wisdom of the springs when it does not serve your ambitions, Kalan? Before Kalan could retort, a young aide entered the chamber hastily holding a glowing crystal tablet. He bowed before Lysander and whispered urgently. The High Counselor's brow furrowed as he read the contents. Speak, Lysander commanded. My lord the aide began, his voice trembling. Our geneticists analyzed the human's DNA. The results show unprecedented compatibility with Celestian biology. His presence could strengthen our fragile bloodlines. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Astria instinctively grasped Brennan's hand. This proves nothing, Kalan barked. Are we to forsake centuries of tradition for biological convenience? Brennan stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. Perhaps this isn't defiance of your traditions. Perhaps it's their fulfillment. A bridge between our peoples built on truth and mutual understanding. Pretty words from a diplomat, Kalan spat. But words cannot erase sacred law. Astria's voice cut through the air like a blade. And yet it is sacred law that binds us. Or would you suggest we defy the decree of the springs themselves? Silence engulfed the hall. Lysander's gaze softened slightly as he looked upon his daughter and the human standing at her side. Oracle Nera, Lysander said gravely, what future do you see? The oracle placed one hand on Brennan's shoulder and the other on Astria's. I see life, she whispered, a merging of two souls, two worlds. This union is no mistake. It is the beginning of a new age. Lysander rose slowly, his ceremonial staff striking the floor with a deep, resonant clang. Then, we must consider this union, not as a disgrace but as a sign from the springs. A vote will decide their fate. As the council began to deliberate, Brennan felt Astria's fingers tighten around his. Their eyes met, a silent vow passing between them. Whatever came next would determine not only their lives but the fragile balance between Earth and Celestia. The bonding ritual. The vote had been swift but not unanimous. Tradition ultimately overruled dissent, forcing even the most reluctant voices to submit to the sacred springs decree. Brennan and Astria's union was to be formalized according to Celestian law. For Brennan, this meant stepping into a realm of ancient mysticism and rites that went far beyond anything he had studied as a soldier or diplomat. This was not a ceremony, it was a trial of the soul. Silent attendants in flowing garments led them through spiraling crystalline corridors deep within the palace. Their soft footfalls echoed faintly in the vast luminescent halls. The walls shimmered with veins of bioluminescence, and the air was heavy with a floral scent so intoxicating it made Brennan's head swim. Finally, they reached a vast chamber dominated by a shallow pool of glowing liquid, its colors shifting like an aurora. The light pulsed like a living heartbeat, casting hypnotic ripples of illumination across the vaulted ceiling. Astria stepped forward, her robe slipping from her shoulders and pooling in silence at her feet. She turned to Brennan, her face illuminated by the soft, flickering glow. Beneath her mask of calm, he saw something unexpected: fear. This is the Hall of Unity, she whispered. Here the bond will be sealed. Once it begins, there is no turning back. If our souls reject one another, the springs will consume us. Consume us, Brennan repeated, his voice low and tight. You left that part out. Would you have agreed if I had told you? Astria asked gently, a faint smile tugging at her lips, though her eyes betrayed no amusement. Maybe, Brennan admitted, exhaling slowly. But I'd have preferred to know I might die on my wedding day. This is not marriage as you understand it, Astria murmured. It is truth unveiled, and truth can be fatal. She stepped into the pool and the liquid rippled around her ankles, releasing a soft hum that seemed to reverberate in Brennan's bones. Come, she said, extending a hand. Brennan hesitated, his fingers brushing the armored jacket of his uniform. Slowly, he peeled it off and dropped it to the floor, leaving only the light undershirt clinging to his skin. As he stepped into the pool, warmth surged up his legs like liquid fire, and a shiver raced through him. When his hand met hers, an electric jolt shot up his arm, stealing his breath. "The springs recognize you," Astria murmured. "Now we must give ourselves completely. No masks, no lies, only truth." She placed her hand flat on his chest over his pounding heart. Brennan mirrored her, pressing his palm against the wild rhythm beneath her ribs. The pool flared with light so bright it forced his eyes closed. Tendrils of pure energy wrapped around them, tightening until he felt as though he were suspended between stars. Memories burst across Brennan's mind in a flood. Astria as a child, staring at twin suns from a high spire. Her silent tears as her father announced her betrothal to a man she didn't love. Her secret joy in exploring forbidden caves. At the same time, Astria gasped as Brennan's life unfolded before her: endless military drills, the sharp grief of losing comrades in battle, and his hidden yearning for a life beyond duty. "Our lives are weaving together," Astria whispered, her voice trembling like the ripples in the pool. "Can you feel it?" "Yes," Brennan choked out. "I feel everything." The light intensified, searing through every cell in his body. His soul seemed to unravel and intertwine with hers, the sensation terrifying and exhilarating all at once. They clung to each other, not in passion but in desperation, as if anchoring themselves against the force threatening to tear them apart. "You must accept me," Astria whispered. "All that I am, the light and the shadows." "I already have," Brennan replied hoarsely. "But you must accept me too. Not just my presence, but my scars." "I do," she breathed, her eyes wide and wet. The chamber exploded with radiance. A shockwave rippled through the glowing water, driving them both to their knees. Their foreheads touched as the brilliance slowly dimmed, leaving the chamber awash in soft hues of blue and gold. The crystalline walls pulsed with energy, echoing their shared heartbeat. "It is done," Astria murmured, her voice raw from the effort. "The springs have accepted us." Before Brennan could speak, the great doors creaked open. Oracle Nira glided into the room, her flowing robes trailing light like smoke. Her ancient eyes shone with satisfaction as she observed the kneeling pair. "You have endured what few can," Nira said softly. "The springs did not simply accept you, they blessed you. Yours is no ordinary bond." Astria sagged against Brennan, her damp hair clinging to his shirt. "Blessing or curse," she whispered. "We are bound now." "Then we'll make it count," Brennan murmured, drawing her close. Nira raised a hand, summoning the attendants. "Prepare them for the ceremonial unveiling. All of Celestia must witness the bond that has been forged." As Brennan helped Astria rise from the glowing water, their fingers intertwined naturally. For the first time since this ordeal began, there was no fear between them, only a fierce, quiet resolve. Whatever trials awaited, they would face them as one, not as a diplomat and a Celestian, but as two souls intertwined by the sacred springs. The hybrid revelation. The ceremonial unveiling was scheduled at dawn, but even before the first light of the twin suns touched Celestia Prime, whispers of Brennan and Astria's union had spread through the palace like wildfire. The sacred springs had not only accepted them, but blessed their bond, a sign that could not be easily dismissed even by the most rigid traditionalists. Yet, in the shadows of the crystalline spires, there were murmurs of dissent schemes taking root among those who feared what this union might bring. As Brennan stood by a tall crystalline window watching the stars fade, Astria entered quietly behind him. She had exchanged her ceremonial robes for a flowing gown of shimmering fabric that seemed to shift colors as she moved. The subtle glow in her skin, something he'd only noticed after the ritual, made her look almost ethereal. "They're talking about us already," Brennan murmured, his voice low. "Not just in the council, but in the streets." Half of them see me as a threat. The other half, I don't know. They see you as a possibility, Astria said softly. You are proof that the springs choose beyond borders, beyond species. For some, that is terrifying. For others, it is hope. He turned to her, noticing how pale she looked despite her calm expression. And what about you? Do you think this was fate? Or just an accident that spiraled out of control? Astria met his gaze, her dark eyes unreadable. At first I thought it was a mistake, but in the springs I felt something, a connection too deep to be chance. Didn't you? Brennan hesitated before nodding. I did, and that terrifies me more than the politics. Before she could answer, a knock came at the door. It opened to reveal Oracle Nera, her robes faintly glowing in the dim light. I trust you are both prepared, she asked, her voice carrying a calm authority. As ready as we can be, Brennan said cautiously. This unveiling. What happens? The council will formally acknowledge your bond, Nera explained. But there is more. The spring's blessing was not the only revelation. Astria frowned. What do you mean? Nera stepped closer, lowering her voice. The healers conducted an examination after your ritual. The sacred waters revealed Astria carries life. The word struck Brennan like a physical blow. Life, he echoed. You mean, you are with child? Nera confirmed, her pale eyes fixed on Astria. The first human Celestian hybrid in recorded history. Astria's hand instinctively moved to her abdomen. That's impossible. Our species. The springs made it possible, Nera said gently. This child is proof that the bond was meant to be. Brennan stepped closer to Astria, his voice low and full of wonder. We're gonna have a child. Astria nodded slowly, her lips parting in shock. A child. Our child. Nera's expression turned grave. But you must be wary. There are those who will see this not as a blessing but as an abomination. Even now, Lord Callan and his allies plot against you. They will not accept this easily. Brennan clenched his fists. Let them try. I won't let anyone harm her. Or our child. Astria placed her hand on his chest, her touch calming him even as her own expression hardened. We knew this would never be simple. But now we fight for more than ourselves. A loud chime echoed through the hall, signaling the start of the unveiling. Nera gave a small nod. It is time. Walk proudly. Let them see that your bond is unshakable. As Brennan offered his arm to Astria, she accepted it with quiet dignity. Together, they stepped into the brilliant light of the council chamber, where hundreds of Celestian dignitaries awaited. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as they appeared, hand in hand, their joined presence radiating the soft glow of the spring's blessing. High Counselor Lysander stood at the center, his expression carefully neutral. The sacred springs have spoken, he announced. This union is sanctioned by our most ancient laws. To deny it would be to defy the very essence of truth. But before he could continue, Lord Callan stepped forward, his voice sharp and venomous. And yet, is it not also dangerous? This bond has already produced a hybrid child, one that could disrupt the balance of our bloodlines. We cannot allow our traditions to be erased in the name of convenience. Astria's voice rang out clear and strong. This is not convenience. It is destiny. The springs chose, and now life has blossomed from that choice. You would call it corruption, but I call it hope. Kalan's face darkened, his hand tightening on the hilt of his ceremonial blade. Then let the council decide. Will we embrace this unnatural union, or will we preserve the purity of our kind? The room erupted into heated debate, voices rising like waves crashing against the cliffs. Brennan tightened his grip on Astria's hand, feeling her tremble slightly but stand firm. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, bound not only by sacred law, but by a bond far stronger, the life growing within her. The uprising. The council chamber had barely calmed when chaos erupted. Lord Callan's words hung in the air like venom infecting those already uneasy with Brennan and Astria's union. Angry murmurs turned into shouts as a faction of nobles rose from their seats, their faces twisted with rage and fear. "This abomination will destroy our people," one counselor cried, drawing his ceremonial blade. Astria's hand tightened on Brennan's arm. "It's happening," she whispered. "They're moving now." Before Brennan could respond, the chamber doors slammed open. Armed guards loyal to Callan stormed in their dark armor, glinting menacingly in the flickering light of the crystal spires. The sound of boots pounding on stone reverberated through the hall as gasps rippled among the onlookers. "By order of Lord Callan, arrest them both," barked the captain, his weapon raised. "No," Astria shouted, stepping protectively in front of Brennan. "You dare defy the Spring's decree! This is treason!" Callan strode forward, his presence commanding and cold. "Treason? No, my lady. I act to preserve Celestia from the contamination you've brought. Your hybrid child is a threat to every bloodline on this world. This ends now." Brennan's pulse spiked as the guards advanced. He placed himself between Astria and the approaching soldiers, his hand inching toward the plasma pistol hidden beneath his ceremonial sash. "If you want her, you'll have to get through me." Brennan no Astria hissed. "If you kill a Celestian in the council chamber, even in defense, it will spark war." "We're already in one," Brennan growled. Before a blow could fall, a voice rang out across the chamber, calm yet cutting like steel. "Enough." Oracle Nera stepped forward, her hands glowing with energy drawn from the sacred springs. The air around her seemed to ripple as raw power surged through the chamber. "Callan, you shame yourself in this council," Nera said, her voice resonating with an unnatural force. "You would violate our most sacred laws to cling to your fading power. The Springs have chosen this union, and yet you defy them." Callan sneered but hesitated, wary of the Oracle's formidable presence. "The Springs are silent now, Oracle. They cannot stop what must be done." "Then perhaps I will," Nera replied, raising her hands. Light flared, forcing the traitorous guards back as they shielded their eyes. "You forget that the Spring's energy flows through me as their vessel." Using the distraction, Brennan grasped Astria's hand. "We need to move, now." Astria hesitated, her eyes darting between her father, who stood frozen in shock, and Brennan. "There's a secret passage behind the high dais," she whispered. "It leads to the sanctum. We can regroup there." "Go," Nera ordered, her voice booming with supernatural authority. "Protect the child at all costs." Brennan and Astria sprinted toward the dais as loyalists clashed with Kalen's forces. Blades clanged, and energy bolts sizzled, the scent of burning crystal thick in the air. Behind them, Nera's power surged in waves, holding back the traitors for as long as she could. As they disappeared into the narrow passage, Brennan glanced back just long enough to see Callan's cold, furious eyes lock on him. The war for Celestia's future had begun, and Brennan knew there would be no safe place for them now. A new dawn. The narrow passage twisted and climbed the glowing crystals in its walls, illuminating Brennan and Astria's path as they ran. Behind them, faint echoes of battle reverberated through the palace blades, clashing voices shouting and bursts of energy cracking like thunder. Brennan tightened his grip on Astria's hand, refusing to let go. "We can't keep running," Brennan said between breaths. "Sooner or later, they'll find us." "The sanctum lies ahead," Astria replied, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "It's a sacred place. Kalen's forces won't dare enter unless they wish to be cursed by the Springs themselves." When they finally emerged from the tunnel, the sanctum unfolded before them, a vast chamber carved from shimmering crystal with an enormous pool at its center. The air hummed with energy so thick it seemed to vibrate in Brennan's chest. Light from Celestia's twin suns filtered through cracks above, forming a halo over the water. Astria stopped clutching her abdomen as a sudden wave of pain swept over her. Brennan was at her side instantly. "What's wrong?" "The child," she whispered. "The springs. They're responding to him. I can feel their power surging through me." A voice spoke from the shadows. "Then, it is here your bond must be defended." Oracle Nera stepped forward, her expression calm but grave. "Kalen has unleashed a rebellion. His soldiers are overrunning the Loyalists even now. If you do not stand against him, he will destroy everything, even the life you now carry." Brennan's eyes hardened. "Then we stand." Nera nodded approvingly. "The Springs chose you because you are stronger together. Trust in that strength." Before Brennan could respond, the sound of boots echoed from the tunnel behind them. Callan emerged, flanked by armored soldiers. His eyes burned with hatred as they locked onto Brennan and Astria. "You will not escape me," Callan spat. "The Springs made a mistake, and I will erase it." "You've already defiled the Springs with your treachery," Astria said coldly. "This ends now." As Callan advanced, Brennan drew his plasma pistol, his body shielding Astria. The Sanctum's pool began to glow, energy pulsing outward in waves. The force was so strong it made Callan's soldiers hesitate, their armor vibrating under the surge. "The Springs defend us," Astria whispered. "They know the child is their legacy." "Enough of this nonsense," Callan roared, raising his blade. "Kill them both!" But before his soldiers could move, the crystal beneath their feet cracked and erupted in a blinding flash of light. The Sanctum's energy struck out like lightning, encasing Brennan and Astria in a protective barrier. Callan stumbled back, shielding his face from the brilliance. From within the glow, Brennan and Astria felt their strength merging, their hearts and thoughts beating as one. A voice neither entirely Celestian nor human echoed in their minds. "Protect the child. Protect the future." Brennan raised his weapon as Astria lifted her hands, channeling the energy of the Springs. Together, they unleashed a blast of light that sent Callan and his forces tumbling backward, their weapons clattering to the ground. When the glow faded, only Brennan, Astria, and Nera stood in the Sanctum. Kalan's soldiers had fled in terror, and the traitorous lord lay unconscious at the edge of the pool. "It is done," Nera said softly. "The Springs have spoken again. They chose you not just for each other, but for all of Celestia." Astria turned to Brennan, her eyes shining with tears and determination. "The war for our people's future isn't over, but I believe we've already won the first battle." Brennan placed his hand over hers, feeling the faint movement of the life within her. "And we'll win every battle to come, for him, for us, for both our worlds." Above them, the twin suns rose higher, their light spilling across the Sanctum as the first true dawn of a new Celestia began.